Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And we've been talking about classifications and assessment, and we're going to pick back up on that. We're going to talk about the neurosis issue. Now, my grandparents' generation, even my parents' generation, talked about neurosis and neurotic, and that's not even a thing anymore. So, like I say, as we learn better, we do better. And the more you know. But one of the changes, probably for the better, is that the term neurosis has been removed from the classification manuals. The DSM-2 listed a wide range of problems under the heading of neurotic disorders, but the DSM-3 dropped the heading, deciding that it implied a psychological cause that had never been validated. Because any person who's a little nervous, a little anxious, a little shy or reserved, got called a neurotic. You have neurosis. So that covered a very wide range of behaviors, and not accurately. So that was removed from the book. Some older folks, you'll still hear him use that word, but it doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. So, yeah. According to Freud, who coined the term, neurosis was caused by a buildup of anxiety, which was itself created by the repression of strong desires. And of course, we know Freud, he did good. He was on the right track, but he was only knowledgeable for his day. He had a very pre-conventional way of thinking about these things. So, somebody can be nervous and anxious, and some people can be because they're repressing their desires, but it might not be the case. So, it is unfortunate that the term neurotic previously held such an important place in the psychological terminology. The term was such a common one among the general population that it may be hard for people to stop using it, and especially people who are still in pre-conventional thinking or conventional thinking of their day. That term might still be bandied about, but again, it's not an accurate term, and you shouldn't be using it. New listings such as specific reading disorder, specific arithmetical disorder, separation anxiety disorder, and shyness disorder, to name a few, have been put in. Now, my son, they labeled him with a specific reading disorder, but the psychologist who saw him told me dysgraphia, because not only did he flip letters and numbers backwards, he flipped them upside down too. So, he does have a severe reading disability. And now my older one had severe ADHD. He couldn't sit still in the classroom, and he couldn't pay attention, and he ended up, I didn't want to put him on Ritalin because I had a relative on Ritalin who said don't do it to him, but we did put him on caffeine, which had a similar effect, and not as strong an effect. He wasn't zombified, but he could focus then. So that's what helped him. Clearly, some children and youth do have serious problems in these areas. I know a lot of people whose kids have these problems, and you probably do too. However, more often than not, these are temporary problems experienced by many, if not most, children at some point in their maturation process. And that's because a lot of times, like my son ended up getting glasses, but then his vision got better and he didn't need his glasses. So he didn't have to sit so close to the board. And there's things like that. And then the more you practice, the better you do get at stuff. My son still has a problem reading. He reads very slowly. He holds thing and he'll cock his head. Sometimes you can tell it's not making sense to him. He has to wait till his brain figures it out, So, like they say, it's not uncommon. So there used to be quite a stigma, and I remember when I was in school coming up, we had the BD and the LD classrooms, that was a stigma if you were in one of those classrooms. And nowadays, they're just mainstreamed right into the regular classroom, and they get ECE help, and they might even have an outside classroom. Two of my children went outside for reading, and their ECE reading teacher was the best lady going, Ms. Bonnier, but she was the best teacher that I ever met in my life, because she had a way of being on their level and getting it to them in a way they could understand. She would get their file, and she would look at it, and she would figure out, well, maybe this will work, and she would try it, and then if that didn't work, she'd try something else, and she would go down on their level and figure out what was the best way to help them to get this. And we need a lot more teachers like that. Since all the developmental disorders involve thought, it could be argued that psychological dysfunction may be to blame, which therefore qualifies these problems for inclusion. Because like with the dysgraphia, that's a problem in the brain. The brain is taking what it's seeing and flipping it upside down, or flipping it, back and forth. That's a problem in the brain. It's not the eyeballs, it's the brain. So, that's a problem, with the kid. And, with a kid who can't focus, that's also a problem in the brain. Mental illness and social policy. A consideration that motivated this move toward a statistical approach was essentially pragmatic in nature. It was an attempt to maximize the ability of mental health professionals to help people and still prosper within our social system. If a problematic behavior is officially listed as a mental disorder, the problem will be covered by insurance. And so that was the move, because back in the day, even, in my parents' day, mental illness was not covered on a lot of insurances. And I remember when me and my husband first got married, there were like separate riders and things like that. But nowadays, it's all covered. So people are realizing it's not just your body you need to take care of, it's your mind. Because your mind actually drives your body. So, it's like the battery in a car. If your battery's dead, you ain't going nowhere. So, even Medicaid and Medicare will pay for treatment if the problem is officially listed as one. So, that was the move to getting this manual, getting these things in this manual, so that people could get treatment for it, because, it was a problem, and, it shouldn't be that you have to pay out of pocket because you have a problem in your brain. If the statistical approach is used, more and more unwanted behaviors will be defined as disorders, and more problems will be treated at no extra cost to the sufferer. So again, the more we learn, the more we know, and the more we realize that, people do have problems in their brain, and it is a medical condition, because your brain is part of your body, so, it needs to be treated. Labeling. We mentioned before that labeling can be a problem in and of itself. That's true. If anyone has ever labeled you, I have certainly been labeled, and people deal with me based on that label, and that's not me. That's their label of me that they use to deal with me. A lot of people, especially people who came up in codependent and they're resistant to, new relationships, they label folks. People, they put them in categories, and that's how they deal with them. They don't get to know them. They just, label these folks. So, that's unfortunate. When discussing mental illness, there is a whole spectrum of social reactions to consider. Admittedly, our society is today much more accepting than it used to be, but that reality isn't saying much. People are just as likely as ever to react negatively to the label of mentally ill. And that's because of, like I say, post-conventional thinking, where this is what your grandma said, this is what your great-grandma said, and then that's what you say, and on and on. But again, like I say, most mental illness cannot be helped. Most mental illness is either biological or situational or conditional. So, you shouldn't look down your nose at people who have a mental illness, because it could have easily been you. So, They just may not react as openly as in the past. And again, people realize, yeah, that was not cool, like in the 1800s, locking folks in the sanitarium and doing experiments on them and horrible things. Most people nowadays know that a mental illness is something you can't really help most of the time, people should not be labeled and stigmatized because they have a problem. Labeling has a definitive effect on the person labeled. Heck yeah, it does. First of all, if you're wrongly labeled, that's going to hurt your feelings, and then that's going to hurt your outlook on other people because you're going to be like, well, okay, so these, a-holes have decided this is about me. Okay, well, if this is what you want, everyone will say that here in a second. First of all, being labeled abnormal is like having a license to act peculiarly. Yeah, and that's how I felt as a kid. Oh, okay, this is what you think about me? Okay, let's roll with that. That was my defense mechanism, acting out. Okay, you want to call me this? You want to act like, okay, we're going to go with this. Everybody expects strange behavior from someone who is labeled as strange. So why disappoint them? This brings up a second point. How much is the strange behavior is a true manifestation of a psychological problem, and how much has been learned from interactions with people who expect weirdness from you. And especially children, they catch on pretty quick. If you label them and you start treating them differently than you're treating somebody else, they're going to notice that. And you're going to get some strange behaviors. So, again, you can't compare kids. That's like comparing apples and oranges. Each one's different. But if you decide one's weird, and you even say that within their hearing, okay, you want weird? Here's some weird. So, you should not label people. It's not nice. A lot of times it's not correct. And you're just going to make the problem worse for them by doing that. As we stated earlier, Saz is an outspoken critic of labeling. He prefers to view mental disorders as behaviors arising from problems in living. Many people have serious problems in everyday life. And at any given time, most of us will. I mean, if anybody goes through life and never has any problems, I would be amazed. And I'd like to know how they did it. Some people, for whatever reasons, have less ability to cope with these problems. And again, we all know that's true. We know people who, you put a little pressure on them, they shatter. And we know people who, you can pound them all day long, and they're like, whatever, I'm doing my thing, I'm having my life, you pound on me all day long, I don't even care. Because they're resilient. So that's the way, it is. Some people can't handle pressure. Some people you just beat on them all day long and they're like, whatever. So, that is not something that you come with, your temperament can be different, and like I say, if you label somebody as weak or whatever, then that's how they're going to feel about themselves. When you start labeling people, you're giving that to them, and children especially are going to internalize that. Oh, I didn't know that was me, but you say that's me, so I guess that is me. And then they're going to be that way. So, keep those labels out of your mouth, and especially around your kids, don't give them that. Because you're going to mess them up, and they're going to internalize that, and that's how they're going to feel about themselves, and you're going to affect their self-esteem, their self-worth. So, keep those labels out of your mouth. Lobbying. In 1976, the American Psychiatric Association voted to remove homosexuality from the list of psychological disorders. And of course, because it happens in nature, and if it happens in nature, it's natural. It's not the average, it's not the mean norm, but it happens. This action was motivated in part by a general belief that homosexuality was not a mental problem, but merely a sexual variant. And of course, nowadays they've gone overboard. We have any number of sexual variants. But basically, what the top four, in mostly my opinion, is you have homosexuals, which are attracted to the same sex as they are, heterosexuals, which are attracted to the opposite sex, bisexuals, who are okay with either one, and asexuals, who just don't want anything to do with it. All these other little things here, excuse me, this phone is ringing from, some kind of crazy place. I don't even know. We've been getting a lot of scammers and telemarketers here lately, so that's a thing. But anyway, that really is it. Now, I mean, you can get into all the stuff, non-binary, again, they're just further explanations of your basics here. So I'm not gonna get into all that craziness, because I feel like if you're looking that hard, then you're just maybe wanting some attention. I don't know, but that's my opinion. They're like I said, basically 4 ways of attracting sexually. The same, the different, either or none of the above. So 20 years ago, that belief would never have been accepted. But in light of today's different norms, it was seen as valid, at least by the majority of psychologists. And again, they said this in 1976, where the association removed it. So that would have been 56 that they're talking about. So yeah, 1956, they're people who were different sexually were probably getting beat up by people. And I heard of a story where one was murdered by the side of the road, barbed wire wrapped around their neck, and a fence, and killed. So yeah, there was no tolerance back in that day for anyone who was different. Oh my gosh, heaven forbid somebody's different from us, whatever. So sometimes the degree to which a behavior disturbs others, or the number of people who were disturbed, can be the true determining factor in whether an act will be considered abnormal. Because again, if Jill is basically walking around with I don't know, 2 or 3 hats on and 2 or 3 purses in her arm, people are gonna be like, okay, you see people like that on the road. But again, she might be homeless and that's all her stuff she's carrying with her. There might be somebody she's playing in a play, and that might be she's wearing a costume on the way to the theater. You don't know. But she might be putting on something for kids at a school. There's like this story about this guy with all these hats. But anyway, or she might have a mental problem. You don't know. So again, judgments on folks, labeling folks is bad. Don't do it. If the act is in any way personally debilitating or harmful, the case against it is strengthened. So anytime anybody's a harm to themselves or others, that's a problem. We were just talking with a family member's doctor the other day about behavior that is not healthy for themselves and is causing health problems, and that's going to have to be dealt with. There was actually a question in their file. I have access to their medical files, and that's going to be something that's going to be discussed. They've already said that they were accused of having depression, and they pretty much do. So but remember that there is more involved in the initial diagnosis than merely placing the behavioral symptoms that an individual presents into their proper categories, because you're a person with a lot of facets to you. You're not just a one-dimensional being, and this is just how it is. Like I say, you've got spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical aspects to yourself that come into play. So again, with psychology, one size does not fit all, and you need to dig a little deeper than just they exhibit this behavior, so they got this. They might be exhibiting that behavior because, it's a coping mechanism, or, they were taught that this is what you do. So, again, one size does not fit all. It's a good idea to supplement this information in order to get as complete a picture as possible about the individual and the various problems involved. In order to achieve this end, many psychologists also use a number of techniques to help determine the true psychological state of those people who come to them for professional help. And that's why I say if someone suggests you take an assessment or test or whatever, just do it. They're trying to figure out what all's going on with you, and just by talking or, witnessing, or so-and-so says this is about you, they don't know for sure. And if they suspect anything, they might want to say, hey, will you take an assessment? Will you take this test? And sometimes insurance covers it, and sometimes they don't. But it's going to behoove you, and most places will let you make payments. It's going to behoove you, or you can put it on your credit card, to do this so that you can get a complete picture of what's going on in your mind. Assessment techniques. Assessment is the term used to describe what goes on in a clinician's office that enables the diagnosis of a problem. And it's also the actual paper test. They call those assessments. Through assessment, the clinician should be able to classify a problem, determine how severe it is, and decide how to deal with it in the most effective way. Because that's their goal. They want to get you well. I've heard someone say, well, they just keep, messing you up so that you keep coming. So you feel like you have to keep coming, so that makes them more money. Well, no. There are clients like that. I know of a psychologist who's had a client who's been coming to them for 20 years. And I had a client who just wanted to glom onto me and have me make all their decisions for them in life. I was like, nope, that's not happening. You're trying to get better. Your goal is to get better. There might be life coaches out there who let you do that, but they're unethical in my opinion. So, no. But, again, they're trying to decide what is the best way to treat you so you can get well. And trust me, I worked at a psychology group and then a counseling center. There are enough people coming in, they're going to stay in business. And especially if they're credentialed with all the insurance companies, all the insurance companies are referring clients to them. And they make relationships with other doctors who refer clients to them. So, they're not trying to get you to keep coming in there, keep getting your money. And in fact, in most cases, it gives them a satisfaction. I know it did for me to see their client, learn and grow, and you've done all you can for them, and they graduate or whatever you want to call it from your program or counseling or whatever, and going out into the world a better adjusted person, because that's the goal there. You want them to be adjusted, not maladjusted, if you are worth your salt in what you're doing. So theoretically, the clinician would simply try to match the presenting signs, that is, the client's problematic behaviors, with the diagnostic criteria for disorders listed in the manual. And that's how it used to be done back in the day, when they had the earlier DSM or before the DSMs. This problem meant you had this. This behavior meant you had this. And again, like I said, the more you know, the better off things grow for you. So thankfully, we know a little better now that there are different aspects, and that's why they look at all the aspects of your person to decide, what all actually is going on here. And, based on that and experience and, education in psychology, what's the best way to treat this person? And then as they get to know you, they'll even maybe tweak things. Well, this ain't working for this person. Let's go this other route. Because you do have to study a lot of stuff. Trust me. I studied for 13 years. But you do have to know what you're talking about. So, that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program. And that's what it is, an educational program. It is not designed to diagnose or treat any mental illnesses. If anything triggered you or you feel like anything I talked about may be a problem in your life, by all means, please contact your mental health professional to get help for that. Thanks for watching or listening. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. The link is in my posts. That's all for now. Until next time.